Welcome, everyone. Let's begin. And welcome to this special webinar. My name is Dr. Stephen Sussman, and I am a professor of public administration at Barry University in Miami and co-founder of the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research. Dr. Luis Fleischman and I, along with a team of dedicated colleagues, created and established this center as an outlet for the marketplace of ideas. The center is a nonpartisan public policy organization, a research center, and a think tank. We are a gathering of scholars, experts, and community stakeholders engaged in research and dialogue in an effort to create practical policy recommendations to current local, national, and international challenges. Therefore, the center encourages discussion and research from multiple perspectives. We believe that good policy is the result of reasonable dialogue and healthy debate, the marketplace of ideas. Thus, through publishing balanced articles and community engagement, such as this evening, the center aspires to provide a platform for critical thinking, analysis, and ideas to confront challenges that affect our world. So please visit our website at palmbeachdemocracy.org. Tonight's event is an excellent example of why the center exists. This evening, the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research, in partnership with Iron Gate Capital Advisors, invites you to this timely and captivating online discussion titled The Intersection of National Security and Florida Tech Ecosystem. I will turn this over now to Dr. Luis Fleischman, who will do a formal introduction of our guests and also explain to you at the end of the discussion how you can participate through the chat and other means. So Luis, I will turn this over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. And just one thing I want to say that a little bit to add to what our institute has been doing lately. We've been conducting, and I think most of you participated in different webinars on different topics. In the last, since our last presentation, we had 2 of our articles published in an organization that is promoting relations between Finland and the United States. As you know, the Finnish community in Palm Beach County is the second after Finland. And we have a connection through people that we know, and they are reproducing some of our articles through Lina. They reproduce one by Linda Geller, another one by me, and I think they are interested in continuing publishing. Also, the Palm Beach Post published an article that I wrote, and I'm about to propose to the Palm Beach Post if they are interested in more articles coming from us, and probably will do the same thing with the Sun Sentinel. The idea is to continue to expand, to be known, and hopefully we will do it. I take this opportunity to invite more of you to write articles, to submit articles on issues that you think that you are an expert on, that you have knowledge that you can contribute. Rosemarie, who actually spoke to us about a month ago about our dependency on pharmaceuticals from China, she made a commitment to write for us, and that's another very good thing. I'm still waiting for her first article. The topic today is extremely important. Today we are going to deal with cybersecurity, or cyber national security, if you wish. As you know, a lot of stuff has been published in the newspapers and in the media. You have heard about Russian espionage, right? A Russian attempt to interfere in our elections, but also trying to interfere in other aspects, particularly through our social media, Facebook, etc. We also have heard about the increasing dependence of companies, Chinese corporations such as Huawei, in developing 5G. Most recently, I believe it was Great Britain that under heavy pressure agreed to not to go along with a contract with Huawei, the Chinese corporation, out of fear that if Huawei actually develops the 5G, they may have access to a lot of data of American and Western citizens. So today, the issue of cybersecurity is crucial. Look at after COVID-19, we basically moved to a cyber communication, right? I am teaching through remote. Most people are working through remote. More and more, we depend on that. And as a result of that, we are also vulnerable. So we are going to hear today from three wonderful speakers. And what I'm going to do now is going to introduce the moderator of the program, who is Hamlet Youssef, and he will introduce the rest of the panel, and the program will move on. They are going to have their discussion, their presentation and discussion, and then there will be a question and answer period. You can either ask the question by raising your hand and ask to speak up directly, or by sending an email, sending a message, a question via the chat. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Hamlet Youssef. Hamlet, by the way, has joined our center from the very beginning and has been a tremendous asset to our center. Hamlet is the managing partner of Iron Gate Capital Advisors. Until recently, Hamlet actually worked for the federal government in the national security diplomacy sector and carried active security clearances. He has extensive experience working with a variety of federal agencies and departments to address issues related to cybersecurity, counterterrorism, and other national security challenges emanating from nation states that are adversaries of the United States and non-conventional foes, such as terrorist organizations. In addition, during his federal government experience, Mr. Joseph had hands-on substantive experience dealing with the use of technology to address critical needs. Prior to joining government, he worked on behalf of private investors to seek out and perform feasibility analysis on cutting-edge disruptive technologies in the energy and technology sectors. Mr. Joseph is a graduate with an MBA from Pepperdine University, with an emphasis on international finance, and a BS in international business from Florida State University. So without, by the way, Hamlet is a resident of Jupiter, where he lives with his wife and 2 children. Is that correct, Hamlet? 2 children?
One.
One, okay. Okay.
Sorry, one.
I'm sorry for pushing. Okay, good. Yeah. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce you to Hamlet. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Hamlet Youssef.
Luis, Stephen, thank you for the opportunity and the invite. Looking forward to a very engaging conversation here. Going to get into introductions here with my fellow panelists, Reese and Ron, and let them get into their backgrounds as well. I'm going to have a couple of comments to open up with in terms of national security and technology and some of the key trends and themes we're seeing. So we're going to talk about this at a very macro level, but I want to bring it down to a very micro level as well in terms of what this means for Florida, and particularly South Florida. I do think I don't want to go so far as to say we're seeing the opening stages of the formation of a Silicon Valley in South Florida. I think it's been tried before, but I think when we're done with this call, we'll get a better sense that there is a real live opportunity for us to have an expanded technology ecosystem here in Florida, which I think is going to benefit us all. I think most of the people that are on this call are Florida residents, and particularly South Florida residents. So this is something that's going to hit pretty close to home. So as Luis said, amongst all things, I'm also a Floridian. So I thought this was a great opportunity for me to not only continue to get involved with the center, but also find a way to discuss a very global topic that has a very local impact. And our attraction towards working with the center, and this is the second event we sponsored. We did another event with the center earlier this year that talked about China's efforts in terms of subverting national security in tech. The reason one of our appeals for the center here, obviously, is there's a lot of big problems that we got to deal with, both domestic and abroad, and people tend to get in different kind of camps, far right, far left. There are some things, in this case, particularly national security. It doesn't call on a solution from the left. It doesn't call on a solution from the right. This is something that should be relatively politically agnostic. And I'll talk about some of the things that'll impact us going into November. So having said that, real quickly, I want to introduce our two panelists. First, we got Ron Tero, and then we have Reese Williams. Both of them are locals here in Florida as well. One's going to come at this from an academic background and his role at FAU, and one as a investor and as a successful serial entrepreneur. So Ron, let's begin with you. Do you want to give us a couple of comments on your background and bio?
Sure. Well, actually, when it comes to Florida, I am definitely a transplant. I was born and raised in International Falls, Minnesota, up on the Canadian border. So I married this place, and there's no way to get a wife to move to snow. So I found, but so here I am. My story is really somebody who came through a technical career. Came through mathematics and physics, IBM labs, ended up in product management, ended up doing strategy consulting for tech firms, ended up ultimately stepping away from that and joining a cohort to in effect start a company in Florida. So in that, my background is sort of professionally has been very heavily focused on telecommunications and network. I noticed you're mentioning 5G and Huawei and a lot of these companies. I have things to say about that if you want to divert a little time into some of that. I've certainly spent time in that area. My company was sold. I sold it to a publicly held company. We started it, grew it. We were serving 42 countries, and we grew it and sold it to a company that's now part of Cisco WebEx. So really one of the competitors to the platform we're using here today. So I know the space fairly well, and I'm happy to share with that. Since all of that, my time has been spent, and in fact, in exiting, I met Mr. Reese Williams, and he'll have a say about what he does. But I really have spent my time looking at early stage companies in Florida. So having grown a company in this ecosystem, I saw a bunch of interesting things, or didn't see a bunch of interesting things that I do see today, and we can get into that. But you know, where I'm at today is really investing in early stage companies. So either investing in dollars or in a direct way by providing them management or advice or whatever the case might be. So I have a couple industry and technical specialties in this, but really where I've put my effort in the last few years now is early stage ecosystem, and what can I do to advance that and profit from it. You know, I'm a capitalist at the end of the day. So yeah, that's that. We can get into more of that as to you see important.
Great, appreciate it. Reese, want to give us a bit of a dive on your background, both what you do with FAU right now and also your prior experience in government as well?
Excellent. On both cases, I'm trying to figure it out still, but I think I might, after 4 and a half years in academia, I might have figured it out. Or I'm not sure. I'm the managing director of FAU Tech Runway. FAU has several centers of entrepreneurial activity. We'll call them hubs, but I would like to think that Tech Runway is one of the preeminent. It's really a resource for the entire university system, which means we have about a 6-county service area. And so as a hub, we bring together instruction, mentoring, capital and instruction on how to raise capital, support with the interns, and trying to think what else, gosh, marketing support, all types of resources, and a very vibrant community to help entrepreneurs, primarily from concept stage through to when they might first get their first repeat sale. Once they have $1 million in revenue, we're probably not the right place. They probably could get better, service elsewhere. But that's kind of the sweet spot for us, concept through to say first repeat sale. And we do rely very heavily upon people like Ron Tero, who's one of our expert mentors. We're a little bit selective in that we look for folks that have previously successfully exited or been part of a meaningful scale of a tech industry. And when we met Hamlet, when we first met you a couple not too long ago, I felt we had met a kindred spirit, somebody who's very passionate about building something that's very difficult. It's very difficult to, startups and tech businesses are not little mini versions of large corporations. Completely different needs, completely different culture. And it's very difficult to actually make a lot of that translate. But that's kind of my day job. Also run the angel group for FAU. And through a very strict conflict plan, I'm also chairman and co-founder of New World Angels, which is another much longer running angel group here in the state. Gosh, I haven't figured out, my career has been, doesn't fit into 5 neat little buckets, but I'll pretend that I did. In the military, I was served for about 14 years, primarily reserve component, but I was mobilized twice. I did have the great privilege of commanding a combat diver detachment for U.S. Special Forces. It's part 20th Group back when I was in shape. And on education, somehow squeezed out 3 degrees during that period, a law degree, MBA, and undergraduate, the last one from Harvard. I started 3 biotech companies back when I thought that biotechnology in Florida from state universities at the earliest stages was easy, profitable, and fun. And I learned not true at all. On the finance side, I was a member of I was a venture capitalist with Gartner's affiliated fund. We managed 163 million in 3 funds. I was their first hire, worked for the former CEO, then the chairman of Gartner. I'd like to think that was like getting a PhD in business analysis in the tech space. It was a really remarkable opportunity, and I'm forever grateful for it. And then I mentioned the angel activity. I would encourage, just a quick side note, anybody who's an entrepreneur, if you have the wherewithal, you should also be an angel investor. It really is the yin versus the yang. Sitting on both sides of the table makes you an exceptionally good investor. It makes you an exceptionally good entrepreneur. And then the last thing, I applaud everybody that's attending tonight, and certainly Hamlet and Luis and the others, because a good part of what I focus my professional life on is actually being meaningful, engaged in not-for-profits. I think not-for-profits are some of the most critical infrastructure, socially, economically, politically. When I think about the institutions that have meant the most to me in my life, school, church, military, angel investor groups, these are all volunteer organizations, most of them, all not-for-profit. Profit is critically important. That's why we're all capitalists. But an organization like this here, exquisitely important. So I applaud the work that you're doing.
Great. Well, good. Let's jump into this real quickly, and I'll begin with just a macro overview of kind of the intersection of national security and technology. Just an expansion on my background. I'm a managing partner in a venture fund that's focused on investing exclusively in technology that has an application in national security and defense. So we invest in early stage technologies that go into critical technology or critical use cases in and around NSA, CIA, Homeland Security, the special operations community, first responders. We're not investing in guns or bullets or tanks. We're investing in kind of the hard tech that goes around national security. So offensive and defensive cyber, unmanned systems, robotics, ISR platforms, which is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. So think of it as industrial IoT. We invest in critical infrastructure, resource protection, artificial learning, AI, machine learning, quantum computing. And the reason I give you this laundry list is as we get into kind of the micro of South Florida, these are areas that I think when you look at the state of Florida, and particularly FAU and South Florida, we're starting to see a small mini ecosystem forming here. The reason we're doing this, and Reese, you nailed it on the head. We are capitalists, so we want to make a lot of money for our investors. But if you look at our team, we've all served in government or national security in one way, shape, or form. We're doing this because we want to contribute to the greater good in a nonpartisan manner. But more importantly, our thesis is shaped by an understanding and a belief that we are in a technology conflict, a technology arms race, however you want to categorize it, particularly with China and Russia. But if you look at it from a macro standpoint, we are going through some significant disruptions from a technology standpoint. Technology, the genie's out of the bottle. The future of this world is going to look magnificently different 10 years from now. And it's going to be shaped by disruptions in tech that I just talked about. So we're at a point now where I want to position us as a country to lead and guide that change, but also do so in a way where the technology is still in the hands of the people. Because the reason I say this is I do think we are seeing the openings of a second Cold War, if not a third World War with China and Russia. I don't think that conflict is going to be kinetic like World War I or World War II, but I think we're starting to see what it's going to look like. It's going to be attacks on infrastructure. It's going to be disinformation. It's going to be economic warfare. It's going to be guerrilla warfare. It's going to be attacks on infrastructure. It's going to be potentially control of assets in space. So that technology that's going to allow us to win that arms race. Right now, that disruption isn't happening at the federal government. It's not happening at the defense contractors. That technology disruption is often happening at the academic level. It's happening at the entrepreneurial level. So one of the things we're trying to do is focus in on unleashing that technology, but also driving the technology into the right hands. One of the things we're trying to do is, in essence, basically almost help lead the way in a Manhattan Project 2.0, where we think that we need to pull together the right thought leaders in the federal government, but as well as academia, finance, research, and entrepreneurship, and to make sure that the right technologies are being used and being put ahead. So what does that mean with terms of South Florida? I was born overseas. I was raised here in Florida. I haven't lived in Florida since 2000, but finally got a chance to move back here a year ago, a little over a year ago, year and a half ago, and I do not plan on leaving. So it's good to be home. But when I met Reese and Ron and kind of started getting settled into South Florida, what it looked like was there was the foundation for a potential little tech ecosystem here, not only in South Florida, but also some of the work that's being done at UCF, the Space Coast, entities like Space Florida, and some of the other major corporations that are moving there, as well as some of the work that's being done out of USF. Particularly the South Florida, for me, one of the things that captured my attention was you're looking at over 1,000 people a day moving to Florida. This is a trend that was pre-COVID, and I think is going to be significantly magnified in the post-COVID world. And that's not people who are retiring. These are people who, like me, are starting families and coming down here. Well, what that means is we're going to have, I think, a growing population base, not only of people who are working, but also people whose kids are eventually going to want to go to school. And I think you're going to see a future growth within potentially the states and private school systems within the University of Florida, or within the Florida university system. So what happens when those entrepreneurs get involved in various different technologies? Well, they go out and start companies. Well, as a shameless capitalist, let's keep those people in the state of Florida, so we can recognize that increase in jobs and the increase in tax base. That's kind of why I've really become very passionate about helping steer that direction here in Florida. Switching gears here, let's talk about folks who've been here. I know Reese, you grew up here. Ron, you're now a transplanted Florida resident like myself. Give us if you guys mind, I don't care what order you all go into, but give us your overview of how you've seen this ecosystem slowly come together and gain pace here, particularly in South Florida. Reese,
well, let me,
or Ron,
yeah, I'm fine to jump in. I mean, well, first of all, again, context. I'm an operator, right? So I was running an early stage company in the mid 90s here in Florida. And if I were to sort of characterize that as we grew the company, I was also the largest software company in Delray Beach, which is quite an honor because it's maybe the only one. So literally our engineering, we were imparting every single software engineer at the time. We had approached universities for some help. They were very disengaged in the 90s, couldn't get academic participation in some of the work we were doing. It was software, telecommunication software. Tech investment money at the time, it was very early. The Florida Venture organization was really in its early days. A lot of tech risk was considered too risky. I'm a real estate person. How do I think about tech? And so I look back, I guess it'd be 20, solid 20 years anyway, 25, and it was a pretty light ecosystem. There, tech was viewed, except by just a very few people, as sort of an unknowable risk. If I were to look at what's going on today, what I'm looking, number one, is just the talent pool for engineers in particular has just continued to grow. The universities are booting out a lot of people. You can, with great reasonableness, hire regionally for sure, if not locally. And a couple of other institutions have come up, and one of the sort of key ones that Reese can talk about is FAU Tech Runway, which is really as an early stage company, how do you find mentors, and how do you find all the infrastructure required to be successful? So you've found your way into a whole bunch of what are called incubators and accelerators. If you jump into South Florida right now, or I mean into Florida in general, there are 75 to 100 incubators, business incubators in the state. Some of them are private, some of them are public. As part of university systems, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a profoundly changed ecosystem. And then if you look at how those have evolved, you've got a large number of everything from angel groups like New World Angels or the Tech Runway Investors Network with Reese. You've got a whole series of seed funds. And most recently, you can kind of tell that the wind is changing, is you're getting a lot of Silicon Valley, who I spent my entire career getting a speech from about you need to move your company to San Jose to get any funding, are suddenly dropping in from the sky in Miami and Orlando, et cetera. So I consider it to be, if you're starting a company right now, profoundly different than my experience, and the level of sophistication that you get from the ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem now is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It needs a lot of support, and so that's not to say it's evolved. I have some ideas on focus, but that would be my big thing is major transformation in 20, 25 years.
Great. Reese?
Yeah, hey Hamlet. So when we're just talking about tech, when I think primarily about Southeast Florida, which first of all, think of growth in terms of metropolitan statistical areas, like the big clusters. You've got the big three, of course, New York, LA, Chicago. And then you've got the next five that cluster around 6 million, 7 million people. We're talking about the Tri-County area. We're solidly in there. We're number 7. I mean, we've got more people than Atlanta, more than San Francisco, more than not DC, I forget the other, Boston, Atlanta, San Francisco. We have more people, and so that critical mass leads to a number of things over time. More tax dollars, and with our favorable climate for weather and the tax structure, we have attracted talent and capital in a way you never would have, just a couple of years ago. So our traditional tech, if you go back 20 years, we were always pretty good at enterprise software. We were reasonably good with medical device and also healthcare IT. But add to that now, that isn't going away. We continue to see really generations of entrepreneurs, produce something valuable, exit, do it all over again. Some of them on their 3rd or 4th ventures. That's very exciting, that virtuous cycle. You read about that in Silicon Valley and Boston. It's happening here in South Florida, finally, and that's really, really encouraging. But let's add to that new sectors that we definitely see, which I think are really exciting because we might have some unique competitive advantages. One of them is what I call marine tech or ocean tech. Well, and Hamlet, I'll follow your lead later to talk about it in more depth. The other is cyber defense. Believe it or not, we have some world-class talent, both here at FAU and at University of Florida and at USF. So really statewide, there are some global minds doing some breathtakingly important research that can be commercialized. And then the other one I'll add to, of course, life sciences. And finally, I'll add is space and aerospace. Again, we have we have a competitive advantage. When you think of the Space Coast and the infrastructure there aren't too many Kennedy Space Centers out there. There aren't that many places with a critical mass of talented, trained workforce. So, and that's, they have all that, but they don't have capital management, which we have down here in South Florida. I think there's a strategic imperative that we work together, mobilize capital management, and take advantage of the workforce and the technology up there and the infrastructure. I'm just going to do I have 2 more minutes, or do you?
Yeah, absolutely. How about it?
Okay. All right. So, when you think about elements of a cluster, there's some really excellent scholarship out there. I will admit I haven't read much of it, but there's some wonderful studies. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I would challenge everybody to try to find some of the best thinking on that. I'm too busy trying to help entrepreneurs, and that's kind of like one derivative above to think about clusters. And that's exactly where, Hamlet, your leadership is really important, because capital needs to think that way. Whereas kind of what I do is much more retail. Let me just help produce exceptionally good entrepreneurs. Right. But what I've noticed is, you need capital, you need management, you need workforce, you need infrastructure and support services, and you need technology, kind of like the raw material. So capital, we have more of that than we have ever had. It's not but it's never been organized, but it's finally getting organized. Thanks to those angel groups that Ron talked about, thanks to leaders like you, Hamlet, and thanks to the fact that the VCs are sick and tired of paying ridiculous valuations and chasing Me Too companies in the traditional centers. And they are coming to Florida. They are coming to Southeast. So that's really, really encouraging. Management, thank God for the tax refugees. Thank God for the retirement failures, the guys that are tired of playing golf and the gals that are just, can't wait to get out of the house, start there, because they can be the executive chair people. They can be the CEOs, or they can mentor the entrepreneurs that have the raw talent but don't have the experience. And I have never seen a kind of a greater embarrassment of riches in my years than more recently. And that's exciting. These entrepreneurs want to give back to the retired folks and the senior folks. Workforce, as Ron indicated, always a challenge. I don't think we'll ever have enough. There has been some very successful innovation and distributed workforce. I invested in a company where the CEO left Silicon Valley, started a company in Miami, and his VC, Vinod Khosla, said, move the company to Silicon Valley. He said, no, I'm not doing it. He said, well, you don't have the workforce. And he thought about it. He said, you know what? You're right, I don't have the software for what I'm doing. So that can stay in Silicon Valley. Everything else is here in South Florida. Hardware, integration, services, just as good as what you have, cheaper, better, and I can control it here. And so we're seeing some of that, and that's encouraging. Infrastructure, so much better. We have a lot of, when I first started my first biotech company, I had to pay my attorney to educate my accountant on what an 83B election was. That was horrible. It was hideous. Now we have just, I think, world-class talent in services and a number of incubation acceleration facilities. They're doing a really good job. It's taken a while, and there's been a lot of mistakes made along the way, but I do see kind of finally some really great, productivity. In technology, we're not Harvard, we're not Stanford, but we don't have to be. I think if we're really smart and do a few things really well, I know we can compete globally. And come to some of those areas that I mentioned before, in the areas where you're investing, Hamlet, ocean tech, life sciences, cyber defense, aerospace and space, we can absolutely compete.
And I think we're starting to see elements of that. My understanding right now is certain elements of the U.S. government, particularly the Defense Department and the intelligence community, are starting to reach out to partner with academia throughout the country. And I think there's several nodes here in Florida, USF, UCF, FAU, the Space Coast. They're all, I think, successfully jockeying for positions and support there because of a lot of the things that you just hit on. It's the human capital and us actually starting to crank out engineers, which is great. The one thing you touched on that didn't really dawn on me until this call was, in addition to having all the young minds that are starting to move to Florida, because you do have such a draw for people who have retired or retired early, you can only play so much golf. Why not get back and get I guess half back in the saddle and be a mentor and be a coach and okay, so you're not going to be working 50, 70, 80 hours again, but if you can help some of these small startups and these academics try to figure out how to build a company around that, that's going to go a long way. There's several.
They can also be angel investors. They can invest in the space that they know so well, and they can be critical angels. That's really important.
Yeah, and that's our big advice for small startups is at the end of the day, I mean, money's money, but if you ever have the choice, you always want to take smart money over passive, because smart money is going to be a force multiplier. You being with your background in special forces, understand that concept for any factor that can come in and it allows me to increase my performance by X. It makes you a much more efficient warrior and a fighter. I think venture capital is the same way when it comes to marrying that with entrepreneurship. You and Ron want to real quickly just give a kind of a quick overview of how that mentorship has been working with New Angels, FAU, and the startup community down here.
Sure, I'll run first. Actually, I'll embarrass Reese by talking about his organization for a moment. I'm going to take the long road there, though. If you look at, so I mentioned that there's 100 incubators, or whatever the number is now, 75 to 100 incubators around the state. If you begin to peel them back, you have to say to yourself, okay, which ones? And by the way, this is a policy thing for all of you in my mind, is not all incubators are the same. And so really the kind of stuff that defense technology needs is ultimately very high tech, research based. And I usually take a look at companies and I go, okay, who's an incubation company, meaning there is no minimum viable product that they can sell. It's still in the lab, it's still technology. And then who is got some clever consumer product, whatever. And so you begin to see a lot of the incubation and acceleration, sort of bifurcate and trifurcate or whatever the word would be. From the standpoint of national defense and all those technologies, there's really only a select number of incubators that have sort of I'll call it the systemic connections to actually help drive defense. And they are exactly like Reese's FAU Tech One Way. They are a place where the PhDs can go, come out of research, have a strong enough mentor team that can help them in this pre-product, pre-whatever, and even pre-investment so that it can get handed off to Hamlet someday for the amazing liftoff. These are the kind of institutions that you as a group should be paying very careful attention to in the state of Florida. Not simply incubators for everything from bagel bakeries to whatever, but the ones that are helping incubate core technologies. A great example, I mean, you brought it up earlier, and I know Hamlet, I introduced it, Reese did, is like PQ Secure.
Yeah. Quantum
computing. It's so fast, it can break the encryption of everything, right? So what do you need? Better math. What do we got? FAU's got a professor who knows better math, right? So, and he's putting it into software. So those are the kind of things that you need very, I'll call it capable incubator accelerators with capable mentoring to help those kind of people along. It also points to the ultimate policy challenge, by the way, for a university, which for me is, Reese has gotten this speech from me, I'll call it the crossing the academic chasm problem, which would be, I have a great idea, and this could change the world, but it might not. So I'm not going to quit my job at the university to roll the dice on this big attractive thing. And so then it sort of flounders. And then the investors come along and like, I'm not going to invest in it if the rocket scientist isn't coming along, right? And so you get all sorts of layers of interest. And Reese can, I'm sure, speak to this because he deals with it in spades. I've dealt with this with some of the specific companies and professors. But these are the kind of policy things. Is how do you create a way for an academic to, in effect, take their stuff to engineering and then further into the market? Key thing, only a few incubators can do that. And those are the ones that should get the attention from all of you, in my mind.
Yeah. No, great comments.
Great. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Hamlet. Yeah, so university incubators do have a unique mission and have great promise to fulfill that critically important role. I think Ron alluded to, because it does take years of, let's face it, government sponsorship. These researchers have to get government grants from the National Institute of Health, from the National Science Foundation, from the Defense Department, and they have to do basic research for years in many cases. And then it finally gets to a point where it's a raw technology, but it can be fashioned into a product or a service. But that really requires the guidance of folks that are business people, that are entrepreneurs, that are successful at commercializing technology and bringing new products and services to market. So an incubator, an accelerator can fulfill that critical need. The trick then is, once you've got the product, it then has to become a company. And at that point, the handoff is so critical. And that's where kind of what my hope, my dream, my vision, my passion, my cross to bear, along with Ron and the rest of us, is we're trying to build that system where retired, successful folks, semi-retired, or maybe not retired, can play the role of executive chair people, or maybe fractional CEOs. Because the companies aren't far along enough that they need full-time engagement, but boy, do they need credible leadership. Yeah. That can't come from the professor. They've got to focus on product development. They have day jobs, by the way. Anyway, but we're working very hard to kind of perfect that. We have a couple shots in goal, and I think we have a couple that are promising. But the trick about it is it's not enough to figure out the formula, because it involves people. Yeah. And people are tough, personalities and politics. It's hard. And so I think we have to have a number of shots in goal. We have to continue to innovate and figure it out. But the sooner that professor can get that raw technology into an incubator, it can then be shaped. They can start accessing other types of funding, SBIRs, STTRs, and angel capital, which they can't get back in their labs. But most importantly, access to minds, entrepreneurial minds, mentors, and fractional CEOs and executive chair people who can really make the difference and significantly accelerate the development of it all.
Yeah, and we're trying to. There's actually 3 live examples of companies that I think the 3 of us are circling around and trying to do this with. I think Ron, you brought up PD Secure. They're doing some very interesting work in terms of quantum encryption. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's a key pillar of this technology arms race between us and China. What quantum computing allows you to do, just to simplify it, is it allows you to make just astronomically large mathematical calculations in the blink of an eye. If China or the US or whatever country gets to the point of separation and breakthrough in quantum technology, they will now have the ability to basically crack any encryption out there. And in turn, they encrypt whatever they want to the level where nobody else can de-encrypt. So massive application from a national security standpoint, and great example of a company that I think we're all trying to work with, trying to figure out how do we shine the right light, the right light on these guys and help them grow. The other 2 companies I think we're also on our radar is you got BioWave and you have Extreme Comms. One is talking about or communications or wireless communications infrastructure, and the other one is oceanic tech and propulsion and underwater system. Those are 2 companies that IronGate actually proudly put in a letter of recommendation with the U.S. Air Force's SBIR program. And we've actually made some introductions to Lockheed Martin Ventures and a couple of other folks. So we have a couple of funds that are actually tracking those guys right now. So it's a great example of what was lack of a better word, a really good idea for a research student or a professor, and it's morphed into potentially a foundation for a company. As a taxpayer, what has me excited about that is 3 guys in a garage or 3 guys in an incubator, if funded properly, are going to morph into 3 guys who hire 10 people, who hire 20, who hire 100 folks. And if all those folks are in South Florida, start doing the math. What does that do to real estate prices? What does that do to the overall health of the local economy and our tax base? So I think it's definitely an example of a rising tide lifts all ships. And when you talk about
30 seconds.
Yeah, please.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Henry.
Yeah.
No, just because the companies you mentioned, I'm so excited about, and for the audience, I want to kind of get their creative juices going or get excited about it. The one company, Extreme Labs, is developing underwater Wi-Fi. If you can imagine that, think about how many devices you can connect and do the radical things you can do with underwater Wi-Fi, as opposed to having to send a signal up to a buoy, then up to a satellite, over to another satellite, down to a buoy, and down to a sensor. Yeah. Literally underwater Wi-Fi, really just disruptive, game-changing, really exciting stuff. The other is what if you could train underwater autonomous vehicles or robots to swim like fish, so their signature is undetectable to enemy surveillance. They can literally swim up to ships, into ports. It sounds like a fish. Brilliant, really exciting. Thank you, Hamlet. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Love both those companies.
If I were to just add to that, so one of the interesting questions, and this, so you know, with the incubator being the focal point for these kind of companies coming out, and research, you know, this incubator is part of the division of research at the university, which I think is very interesting from that perspective. But the other sort of leg of a stool here is early stage capital and having the kind of investors, mentors. Okay, I'm a nerd, I can help, but okay, where are they going to get money? And so to have a level of sophistication that's a step up, that says, yeah, I get it. This is quantum, this is elliptic curve cryptography, and where they're going with this, and I get it. And I can actually evaluate the risk and or the attempt of taking it forward. You know, when the NSF drops off, right, an early stage first money in has to come into these companies. And that's where I think the incubators become the focal point where, you know, and preparing these people for that. And those people have to emerge and be part of this deal.
Yeah.
So very, you know, to me, it's sort of a multi-sided stool. You've got to have the mentors, you've got to have the investors, you got to have the founders, and then, you know, stuff like incubation and accelerators put it all together. And for science, this is way more important. That chasm is not to be underestimated of a university professor. So many of these things cannot be part-timed, and so you've got to figure out ways to build infrastructure around somebody who would ultimately be a chief science officer or something like that.
Great. Well, I think I could probably, judging by the passion here, the three of us could probably talk about this for another 2 hours. But before we did that, I wanted to, Luis, Stephen, turn the floor back over to you all to see if there's any questions that you all want to pose to us. I know we've been talking for about 30 minutes here, so want to be mindful of our viewers and give them a chance to ask some questions as well.
Can you hear me, Hamlet? I just unmuted myself.
Yes. I can.
Okay, good. First of all, very exciting. This is extremely encouraging for our future, beyond the fact that you think we're going to be in a world war. Beyond that, this concept, this what's happening, what Reese is doing with FAU and all these other innovators, all the innovators out there, those who are giving money for this for innovation as well. It's all very important. And what comes to mind isn't necessarily a question. It's a couple comments, almost an aha moment, what I see happening. In my school at Barry University, I'm in the School of Business, the Andreas School of Business. We have an entrepreneurial lab, and they do a terrific job trying to encourage students to dream in that sense, and they work very closely with the students, and it's just a terrific program they have. Something I didn't know they had until my program in public administration moved over to the School of Business, and that's one thing. The other is there's an organization that I've been trying to get involved with called TOM, T-O-M. It's they're out of Israel. It's Tikkun Olam Makers, and I was at the University of Haifa. I have this joint appointment at the University of Haifa in Israel at a time when Tikkun Olam Makers, an entrepreneurial vision organization, was there presenting all of the work they did in an effort to help those with disabilities. They had their students. I sat there not even knowing I was there for other business, and I happened to walk into the auditorium, and there was a 2-hour session of students who created all sorts of mechanical devices to help those who are disabled walk up steps and do all sorts of things. It was truly amazing, and it's an entrepreneurial organization looking for people who, they're an outlet for people, students and others, who are looking to show products and to help their ideas come to fruition. So I was just thinking about that and what's happening with at FAU with the why is my mind not working here? Reese, your organization, forgive me. Yeah, so with your organization at FAU, and it's just very fascinating. It's it actually.
Stephen,
go ahead.
actually, let me put that in a tech context, because there is something when you are either an investor, not just an investor. Let's just leave it at that, and you're sitting there saying, what are the odds that this company is going to make it, right? And so there's a technology risk, but you know what the thing that makes something look really, I'll call it investor sexy, right? It's a business founder and a technology co-founder.
Yeah.
And so if you were looking at programs that, especially in the sciences, et cetera, would be really kind of a key focal area, because that would put a lot of the investors at ease also, to say that, yeah, this chasm can get covered, right? Mm-hmm. So how you get there, it can be messy, it can be across national boundaries, it can be et cetera, but that's a key focus.
Very, very interesting. Thank you for condensing that into an excellent response.
Stephen, could I add something super quick? For many folks are so fascinated by technology and entrepreneurship that they'd like to get involved, and for them, angel investing might be appropriate, or being a mentor if they have a tech background might be appropriate. For the rest of us, or the rest of them who don't have that or don't have the time, you look at a fund that Hamlet is raising with his colleagues. What a great way to get exposed to the best, the newest, like the first shot, the first eyes on technology that will reshape the world. And Hamlet has the opportunity to sit back and see which are the best ideas that come out of my program, which are the best companies that Ron worked with, and he gets to kind of cherry pick and place bets and manage them on a portfolio basis. And I'm not sure that's, I don't think we talked about that yet, but all of us, if we have some, there is a role in our portfolios for risk. And this is increasingly in a zero interest rate environment where you can't be in cash and bonds. Some exposure to tech in this way is definitely advisable. And it's just Hamlet's doing it through a fund is a good way to go, Frank.
Let me say this. I know Luis wanted to say something, but one of our board members and participants, Michael Landau, is highly engaged in his community in STEM with students, high school students, elementary students, and so on and so forth. They're learning as little kids now, of course, how to use computers, etc. So do you see this? I can see kids growing up in such a technical world that, the innovation that, they think maybe this way. They think in terms of how can I do something simpler, better, and then hook up with someone who can actually give me the money to do it.
I look at it this way. It's sort of like you don't need to know how an engine runs to drive a car, right? And likewise, it's really about teaching kids about tool sets. And I'm a little bit of the attitude that a lot of kids don't need a lot of encouragement on that. They should, if they're especially going up to university, they're going to learn all the tool sets. The more interesting question, I guess, is a STEM question, which is who wants to make stuff? Because a lot of, you can be either a consumer of what these machines put out, or you can be a creator of it. And so you got to look for the creators, in my mind. It's not it's not simply, exposing them to computers, if you will, because they won't be able to avoid them, and neither will you and I.
Right.
They're everywhere. They're embedded into everything. Is kind of where it's all going. So my take is, do you want to make some of this stuff?
Right.
So,
I'm an end user. Everyone's an end user.
we all are.
Yeah.
To a max.
Yeah.
If you allow me, Steve, I'm encouraging people to ask questions, but the key point is, well, we have heard a lot of conversations about the incubators and I'm thinking of what Ron is saying, the importance of creating creators, if you wish. National security is an issue that I very much care for, like most people in this audience. And very much, China is a real threat. The fact that a company like Huawei eventually would take us, and we will be the company that the Americans will use, or the fact that they will be able to disrupt our national security, through cyber. The title of this program is precisely national security. How far behind are we, or how are we in relation to China at this point? I know we keep hearing that China steals property, that steals patents, that they are not as smart as we are, but they steal, and now all of a sudden they are up there. What is the truth in all that, and to what extent your efforts are helping that competition with China? And that, I think, is important, at least to people like me, and I believe many others as well.
I'll give you an intuition.
Intuition.
And this is, and the reason is because I have probably better than average intuition, only because Huawei stole a bunch of intellectual property from the company that acquired me.
Yep.
So I have some back knowledge of some of that. You can, stole, whatever, misappropriated patents and whatever you want to call this. I mean, it's an industrial scale operation. The reality, first of all, you got to recognize in China is actually China has its own problems internally with security, meaning hackers love to hack, even if it's their own, that kind of thing. So It's a lot messier than simply, and China's not China. I was on an airplane, this is 10 years ago now. I was on an airplane with a guy. What do you do? Well, the bottom line was what he was doing is he was like a venture capital seed guy who would send a young person to work for a company, right? And kind of like recruiting, et cetera. And then he'd pay the kid $1 million to walk out with the software. Now, so I said, well, gosh, who are your, he would actually pay the kid in advance. So you go work here for 5 years, right? Hoover up as much stuff as you can and walk out the door with it, and I'll pay cash and start your company. I'll be your venture capital, to start the company or whatever the case might be. And I said, well, who are your customers? And it was one region of China stealing from the other region of China. It was Chinese.
Good old China.
And so, it's a lot more complicated than that. I would say that when it comes to going after stuff, they're busy locking down their infrastructure in I think, unhealthy ways. We're always going to be more open, so there's always going to be pressure on us to have security, candidly. But the question would be, the most secure way to do it is to basically take away all yours and my flexibility in life, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm not as hyper about it in that there's now an arms race, but it's actually not on nuclear. It's probably on encryption technologies, network technologies, routing technologies, and some of that. By the way, another anecdotal story, and then I'll shut up. But Apple, kind of not in the center of the news, Apple fired a manufacturer's management team top to bottom, or insisted that be fired. It wasn't, they subcontract. The reason was, this happened about 6 months ago, plus or minus, is they send engineering orders to the fabricators to make stuff, right? In the chips and whatever. And that's, Apple keeps the design in the United States and moves the fabrication out. They changed the design on the fabrication in the manufacturing facility, which is really bad, because the way you're going to secure most technology going forward is not by having security in software. You're going to start putting it down into the fab, down into the chips. And so here they were, it was probably a little penetration test to see whether they could get away with making a small change in a chip design and see if Apple missed it. They did not. And so there's a lot of important questions about chip design and control of design into manufacturing. What if you hand that design to the manufacturer, but came off the end of the manufacturing line different than your design? That's a real problem. And so that's going to be kind of the interesting, where a lot of this is going to be fought going forward in the hardware.
I'm sorry, Luis. I have a quick question, national security question, but more of an everyman's national security question. Does TikTok really pose a national security issue?
On its surface, no. No.
On the surface,
But
you can't tell.
No. Yeah.
See, that's the issue. Is none of this is transparent. It's sort of like, is Google filtering, or for political reasons, et cetera, all the different social platforms? The answer is, they won't show you the algorithm. The algorithms themselves have their own behaviors. And however, if you're an outsider sort of looking at the stats, it would appear they are, right? So is that intentional, unintentional? Is it, So the problem with TikTok is, at the end of the day, is they're not willing to in effect be transparent on the software. Therefore, you need to assume that they're a problem.
Yeah. The issue there with China right now, I think, is they right now, think of them as just a massive collector of data, any kind of data, consumer, industrial, corporate, government, demographic information. And I think, well, what are they going to do with all this data? Right now, they don't have the processing power. They don't have the manpower to crunch that data and use it in a competitive or comparative advantage. But that's where I think breakthroughs in AI and breakthroughs in quantum, I think, are going to be a massive game changer, because now they can start using that data back against us, both in terms of getting a position of dominance technologically, a position of dominance in terms of intelligence, and in terms of industrial espionage. Going back to the comment you made earlier, I don't think we are going to get in a world war, so to speak. But the warfare is being fought. Yeah, the warfare is being fought asymmetrically, and I think in the back half or the middle in the back half of the 21st century, the country that gets to the position of dominance from a technological superiority standpoint is going to have a superior position from an economic standpoint. Armed with political superiority and economic superiority and technological superiority, you're not going to have to fight a war. That's how we won the Cold War in the 20th century. We out-hustled and outdid the Soviets and Nazi Germany when it came to two very critical areas, nuclear and space. I think this arms race or this tech race in the 21st century is going to be around some of the topics we talked about today: artificial intelligence, quantum computing, hypersonics by some extent, commercial space. These are areas that if we can get to a position of dominance, then I think we can continue to drive the American or the Western ideals, which I think is critical. I do think that the future is going to be dictated by technology. What it's going to come down to is what kind of future do you want to live in? Well, what would have happened in the 21st century or in the 20th century if the Nazis or the Soviets had won? What would the 20th century and what would right now look like? When you look forward into the 21st century, what would it look like if China and a handful of call it stateless global corporations use technology to control society and control how we think and what we can and can't do? Is that a future do you want to live in? Or do you want to live in more of a libertarian future where technology is developed and controlled by the people, of the people, and we still maintain the controls of tech, and we don't let it govern us, we govern that tech? My vote is to be in that latter half, and that's what's kind of our passion and focus, and why I think I want to see us win, because I think that's in our DNA. That is in the Western DNA.
So how can
Hamlet, let me jump in and actually just add one thing on this. And did anybody ever watch Silicon Valley, the HBO series?
Yeah.
If you did, they had something called the distributed web.
Yep.
And actually, distributed web is a real thing. And what it is today when we're moving data around, it's basically through an intermediary, right? It's Facebook. It's whomever. Distributed web says that it's a distributed architecture that you and I are moving. The architecture of the network itself is a mesh of us communicating with each other more directly. It's sort of I'll call it blockchain brought down to network down, and that's another area of, I think, policy. If you guys are paying attention, should be in that area.
Great.
a quick question?
Next gen architecture.
Just a quick Hamlet, responding to what you just said. Can average people do anything? Do we lobby Congress? Do we lobby the state? What do we do? Or do we wait and hope that the three of you save us from ourselves? I mean, what can we do?
Well, I think grassroots movements like this, conversations like this, I think help. I know I've been involved with multiple panels over the last several months talking about this topic, but with everyone who's dialed in here, I think find out where and how you can get involved. You have different avenues. If you want to get involved financially, there's funds like ours that are very active in this space. If you want to get involved as an angel investor, you have Ron and Reese. If you want to get involved as a mentor or as a counselor or somebody who can help a startup come together, you have Ron and you have Reese. And if you want to get involved in a position of thought leadership and governance, this is, I think, a key critical platform of what this center is looking to do in terms of establishing a flagpole here in Palm Beach, and I think that'll spread like fire at this point. So that whole adage, when you leave this call, find out how you can get involved and go out there and recruit 2 or 3 people that you know to get involved in this space and educate them. It is going to take a grassroots movement from the ground up, but also I think you are seeing some things that are happening at the DC and at the policy level. When we first started our fund, we were kind of viewed as, oh, well, this is only going to work in a right wing or Republican administration. It's categorically not true. We've had some conversations with folks that are thought leaders on the right side and the left side of the aisle. And if there is a regime change, or if there's a change in the presidency in 2000 or in 2004 or 2008, it really doesn't matter. Or I'm sorry, 2020, 2024, 2028, it really doesn't matter, because one of the things we're hearing from the Democratic side of the aisle that when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to national security and defense, China is now being viewed as an adversary from both sides of the aisle. When it comes to investing in technology and innovation, even the folks that are potentially jockeying for position on the Democratic side have talked about potentially shutting down multi-billion-dollar weapons platforms, but they want to reallocate those dollars and those resources in areas like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, cybersecurity, robotics, autonomous systems. So I think this is at a point now where we're at the beginnings of a golden age, and when it comes to national security and investing in that space. I think, again, shamelessly speaking, I think we're at a golden age when it comes to positioning Florida, and particularly South Florida, as potentially a key node in that effort.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Luis, did you have?
Joel, I think Joel Levine, I think he's indicating he has a question, right, Joel?
Yes. Can you hear me? Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Yeah. Let me try to give a briefer than usual question for me. I started two tech companies about 20 years ago with some others with Russian mathematicians. We basically purchased them from the KGB in exchange for an investor interest. And those companies are, I guess, what they call adolescents. They're still around. We've been strictly defense, sort of hanging around Fort Benning for a couple of decades. One of the things that's happened in the Trump administration, and I also taught at Case Western, which is basically an engineering school, for 39 years, before I became old and doddering, people from the north come to Florida, I was told, so I came here. Both at Case Western and in our company, what's happened with the Trump administration is there's been a sea change about bringing over high-end engineers, mathematicians, as in a number of ways. Subtle, not so subtle, indirect, direct, depends on the country. And our ability, and I was sort of in this Russian mathematician national community, because a lot of companies like ours basically looted, once the Soviet Union came out, there were an unbelievable number of really high-end Russian mathematicians and physicists, and we looted them into the United States. But now there's been a change. These people, not only Russians, not particularly Russians, but a lot of others are pretty unwelcome, and they're pretty unwelcome in the engineering PhD program at Case. Do you have any comment about that as a long-term issue?
Yeah, I think being a first-generation immigrant, I think we're a better country because we bring the brightest and best minds here, educate them here, and I think the goal is to keep them here. So I think if you're bringing the right folks here, it's a boon. But I think there's been an issue that we've seen happen, particularly on the academic side, and there's a ton of articles that have been published recently that highlight how both academic and engineers that have come here for work, particularly from Russia, but more so from China, have come here literally on a short-term horizon. Like Ryan had mentioned, 3 to 5 years, come in, get your hands on the keys to the kingdom, and then come back here and we'll help you get set up with your own company. So it's a fine balancing line, because I think we become better if we attract and bring the best and brightest minds here. And I think we become better by Americanizing them and keeping them here, and then having them contribute to the world from here.
I was in our company. So again, I'm software, et cetera. And so I just to amplify what Hamlet just said, is that it's all about being selective and actually being smart. One of the things on the tech side, especially with H-1B, we brought in, half our engineering team was green card, right? For any number of reasons down here in South Florida. The reality is a lot of that gets hoovered up by the big tech companies in San Francisco. There is a guy, he's got a YouTube channel. It's called The Tech Lead. He's a Japanese American. And he has a couple of videos about what's kind of going on, because you bring these people over on an H-1B and you own them, right? They're desperately trying to stay. They're trying to escape the H-1B to get the green card. All sorts of trouble with that. And so there is something of I'll call it a flow that a lot of the H-1B is really owned by the largest of the companies. And there's a lot of angst in the software engineering community about that, the domestic US software engineering community. So I would go find that guy. I can't remember his name, but it's called The Tech Lead out on YouTube, and you can find him. And he'll cover lots of other nerdy things, but this is one of the things I thought he had a pretty compelling argument to say, yeah, this is a very good deal. And so, but I, listen, just having an organized philosophy for doing things is good, not a willy-nilly, et cetera, et cetera. So, improvement good.
Great,
Hamlet,
thank you.
can I share, and Stephen, can I share my jingoistic fantasy?
Absolutely.
Sure.
All right. So we're the third most populous country on the planet. I think we have about 330 million, thereabouts. China and India each have well north of 1 billion. So let's just pretend we're about 25% or 1/4 of their size. So let's go up to 400 million. Let's go on a talent rate globally. Let's bring in 80 million, 70 million of the most talented, brilliant, wealthiest, connected, whatever. Let's just open the country to them. Free visa, free everything. Let's grow to 400 million. Gosh, we would still be 1/3 the size of India and China. I know this is very sophomoric, but it is in the end all about people.
Yep.
It is all about people. And if we had 80 million more of the cream of the crop globally, I just can't help but wonder what a difference that might make. Now, I know that's pure fantasy. It would never happen, but it is an interesting fantasy.
I hate to say it, but it's a unique way of looking at it. I wish it was more mainstream, but terrific. What a great
Well, it's
idea.
also the reason it won't happen, because I would say anybody who has a PhD can come to America and teach in any university at any price they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
So it's a question of wherever you target that kind of idea, you're going to have a domestic audience that's going, what?
Right.
Really? So, I totally get that, by the way. You could be a superpower in software. But, right?
Maybe they could colonize Wyoming.
Yeah, there we go.
Right.
So, anyway.
Well, does anyone else have questions? This is so interesting. Luis, did you have a last question before I close up?
Point, I think I was interested. I mean, maybe my last question, and I didn't. I mean, I want everyone else. But the question is, how far advanced Russia is? We know that it's behind us and behind China, but still, Russia is a concern because of the level of aggressiveness.
Yeah. And
how do you assess Russia?
I think Russia right now, if I had to handicap it as a quote unquote amateur based on open source reporting, I would look at Russia as probably having maybe a stride or two ahead of us in the area of hypersonics, but in the areas that really matter when it comes to artificial intelligence and quantum are the two really big ones. I think if I would have to guess, I think we're on par with the Chinese. If you look at quantum, if you look at artificial intelligence, I think we are probably cranking out better engines and better ability to process that math or process that intelligence and keep it really top level. But the advantage that China has is because of one, they have a multiple of 4x in terms of population, and they have no governance and controls or in place from a libertarian standpoint. They have much larger data sets of information they can use to train their AI and make their AI better. Compound that with information they're trying to artificial intelligence. So yeah. If you compound that with what they're able to quote unquote borrow, steal, or divert back, it makes them, I think, potentially have an advantage there. I do view at the macro sense, depending on how you look at it, almost like a neck and neck race with us and China. With Russia probably a couple of good strides behind us, but that can change very quickly. The issue with this race is when you get to a point of disruption in key areas like artificial intelligence, particularly in quantum, you could be in a position where your adversary laps you. And once that happens, it becomes almost impossible to close that gap, and that gap will continue to grow exponentially. I think that's what happened to us with the Soviets. They were out and ahead of us when it came to a Sputnik moment, and I think we closed that gap very quickly and then leapfrogged them when it came to commercial or not commercial, but weaponizing space and advancing our ICBM capabilities. And they looked across the table, and I think they had the realization, like, holy cow, we cannot win a war with the U.S. because of their political, economic, and now military dominance. You came to capitulation, and I think that's what is going to happen. Knock on wood, with us in China, is we got to get to the place where, again, as a Reaganite and being an immigrant to the U.S. during the Reagan years, I do believe you win through peace through strength, which is making sure you have superior technology, which allows for superior economic power, and at that point, you can dictate your geopolitics and your economics globally.
Now, just to follow with that, and I know there is another question on the pipeline. What about our allies? What about Germany?
Yeah, well,
Great Britain, France.
Yeah, so going back to the Manhattan Project, that was in cooperation with our allies. I think if you look at what's happening right now in the areas of national security, we are as a country starting to engage with the quote unquote Five Eyes, which are the English speaking allies. I think Israel, I think Japan, I think South Korea are starting to play in tech cooperation and collaboration. And as of today, a press release just went out. We are now an investor in a company out of Germany that is making some significant advances in space propulsion as well. So you're starting to see a collaboration point with Western companies or like-minded companies and countries that are starting to cooperate and share notes.
Terrific. Joel, your hand is up. Did you have another question, or was that from your previous question?
That was my previous question, but I'm a little surprised that a libertarian could be in favor of the Manhattan Project, which was the most domineering government issue in the history of mankind.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to comment, as somebody who's read economics most of my life, that there's a lot of economic theorists out there. I mean, more than people might know, who say that the only way for the United States to sustain growth is to add 80 to 100 million people. So there is a huge economic literature, perhaps not well received in my old state of Ohio by unemployed steelworkers, but in places like MIT economics department that says add anybody, add somebody working at a hotel or add somebody teaching at MIT, and you'll grow the economy. And the numbers are pretty solid.
So you are talking about only numbers. That means they don't have to have PhDs.
No, they don't. In fact, there's no reason. Within one generation, it's irrelevant. It's absolutely irrelevant. And there's growth at the bottom. I mean, there's always been growth. The tremendous growth of Southern and Eastern Europeans made in between 1890 and 1930 in America, 1924. That nobody had any education. And the Chinese immigrants who did the railroads had no education. In fact, nobody who's come to America has had education until we started more or less looting the MDs from around the world in the last 30 years to give us health care and let everybody else die.
Well, on that note, I have there's another question out here. But I just want to say, Joel, this is to Hamlet, Reese, and Ron. Joel is a prolific writer for the center, very active with the center. There's a question here, and I think Hamlet, you partially spoke about this. How advanced is China compared to the US in terms of defense technology such as AI, machine learning, and water warfare technology?
Frighteningly good, and we'll keep that at the unclass level. In terms of AI, like I said, they have some compelling resources in play, and they have access to, I think, a larger set of training data to help get their AI smarter and better. On the underwater tech, that's becoming an issue, obviously, with the South China Sea, because I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to use their either dominance or lack of dominance in naval warfare to use the islands as a means of keeping us at a distance. So using their conventional, unconventional means to keep us there. There's it's a race. I mean, every week there's a different bit of reporting out there in terms of who's ahead and who's not. Part of it is probably real information, part of it is disinformation. But I do think that lead seems to change depending on what optic you apply to it.
Terrific. And I know we're coming up against the hour and we need to end, and there's one other point of business I need to go over, but I'd like to thank you, Hamlet, Ron, and Reese. You guys were just absolutely fantastic. An important topic, and I know Luis, and we all appreciate you guys taking the time to come here this evening. You didn't have to drive, but it's a
Beautiful thing.
Yes, yes, and such an important issue that, of course, we all will have to face in the future. And in closing, I'm going to put up our the slide. I think you can all see the slide. This is for everyone attending tonight. Just a little bit more about the center, why we exist. The center views politics and policy as a means to provide responses to public challenges in domestic and foreign affairs in an effort to affect change. And I think, as Hamlet pointed out, this is one way we can do it in this space in national security, by holding these types of webinars with experts. How do we do it? Through publishing balanced articles. Thank you, Joel and Luis and others. And community engagement. The center aspires to provide a platform for critical thinking, analysis, and ideas to confront challenges that affect our nation and the world around us. And what are we? We're the center. The center is a nonpartisan public policy organization, a research center, and a think tank. And the center hopes that we can count on all of you to help us in our effort to encourage bipartisan dialogue in our effort to affect change. We are a 501c3. All donations are tax deductible, and you can go to palmbeachdemocracy.org and click on the donate link. So I thank you all for coming, and we're just up against the hour. And please tune in for future events as lively and as interesting as this, for sure. And have a good evening, everyone. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thanks to the Hamlet and the panelists, Ron and Reese.
Our pleasure.
Of course.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks
Good
to the
night.
audience for taking time and spending a couple of hours with us.
Thank you all.
Yes.
See you, everybody.
And drinks are on me. How's that? Okay.
There we go. I'm on
Send you the bill.
Bye.
Bye now.